You know of Dr. Rizal's works, his novels, his legacy, but do you know his character? Let us get to know Dr. Rizal together. My name is Dolly Joy Anna Ortiguera.
I am Luigi Vincent, Austria.
I am Andrea Gale de la Cruz.
I am John Samuel C. Espiritu.
My name is Matthew Jerry Fonz.
I am Angelo Titco.
And we are Group 1 from first year BS Entrepreneurship at Beda University, Manila. Join us as we delve deeper into Dr. Rizal's philosophy, his Christianity, and his identity as the Philippines' national hero by analyzing his last 24 hours on Earth and investigating on a controversial retraction.
Bayang sinisinta ang iyong kasarinlan, ang tanging adhika. Buhay aalay sa pag-asang dalisay. Adios, umahong malaya.
Eto ako't nag-isa, balisa walang kasama. Tulad ako ng lawin, umaawit sa kanyang sarili.
Now that you have seen our trailer, let me show you our brochure. This is a three-folded newspaper-style brochure that contains basic information about Rizal and his alleged retraction. Let me show you part by part, and let's start at the center front page. This contains background of Rizal such as his full name, place, family, lovers, school attended, etc. And of course, the said retraction paper. On the right side is the English translated version of the said retraction. Let's go to the left side, and this article talks about the works of Dr. Rizal, such as the most notable Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Now, let's see the back side of our brochure. It contains the alleged reasons of Dr. Rizal, which is first, to marry Josephine Bracken, second is to go back to his roots, and third, die as a Catholic, and lastly, so that he would not go to hell. The left and the right side contains the effects of the retraction to the Filipinos and church if the alleged retraction was true, and we will explain more of it later as we continue on our part. That is all, and thank you.
Here is our executive summary for our topic, the retraction of Rizal. We prepared a list of our members together with our roles and contributions for this report. Next is the abstract, a short summary or an overview of our completed research about the retraction of Rizal. We explain the content of our research here, which includes the existence of a retraction and its controversy in the Philippine history. All without going into great detail, we made it concise and as clear as possible. Then we have our keywords and phrases. These words, like controversial, convictions, and cross-reference, define the field and the topics covered by our report. We also included an outline of our presentation. Here's a table showing the flow of our presentation from the introduction to the conclusion with the person in charge for each part and the time allotted for each member. Now, let us move on to the main content of our group's work. For our world behind the text or diachronic analysis, we research about the historical background of the people, places, and time during Jose Rizal's time. We also included pictures to show how Fort Santiago looked back then. For our context, we divided it into three most significant parts of Dr. Jose Rizal's life related to the retraction: pre-execution, Dr. Jose Rizal's last 24 hours, and post-execution. Here, we describe the state of the country and the people during this time. For example, in the pre-execution part, we describe what the friars thought of Dr. Rizal's beliefs, which led to his death sentence. Next are the people behind the story, culture, and time. For this part, we made a list of the people involved or mentioned in the retraction of Rizal. Beside their names are descriptions of who they were. Then, we have our diachronic analysis, where we stated how the Philippine society changed significantly since 1521 and how Dr. Rizal's writings sparked a revolution. For our historical criticism, we analyzed our primary source, which is entitled Light in Rizal's Death Cell by Manolo O. Vanyo. We described its content and how Vanyo presented all perspectives surrounding the controversy while writing this book. We also stated here how reliable this primary source is, as this book was made with different sources and no biases. For our contextual reading, we just wrote the whole point for our analysis, how we considered reliable perspectives and how we filtered inaccuracies in order to make a strong analysis while empathizing with Dr. Rizal and the people associated with the retraction at the same time. The next part is our world of the text or synchronic analysis. Here, we have the subject, which shows who Dr. Rizal was and what the retraction of Rizal was all about. For the theme, we wrote the necessary themes that we applied to make a thorough analysis of the numerous testimonies, accounts, and reports about Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours. For our form, we divided it into two parts, the elements and the style. Under the elements are the plot, setting, characters, and the language used in the primary source. And for the style, we described how Manolo O. Vanyo wrote his work, which is from a third-person point of view. We also included here the year when the book was published and how it does not lack perspectives from other people. Next is our synchronic analysis, which we also divided into three most significant parts of Dr. Rizal's life related to the retraction, just like how we did for our context. We have the pre-execution, Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours, which includes everything that happened during those hours, and the post-execution, which includes where Dr. Rizal's body was brought after his execution and where his remains were buried. For our structural analysis, we just wrote what our primary source contains. For our form or genre analysis, we described how the book shows historical evidence of events and also different relationships Dr. Rizal had molded throughout his journeys. We also classified the genre of this book as a historical literature and non-fiction. For our textual criticism, we researched about Manolo O. Vanyo and described how his work, Light in Rizal's Death Cell, is one of the most significant primary sources in the history of the Philippines. Then, we have our intertextual analysis, which we divided into 5 parts: Rizal in the 19th century Philippines, Catholicism and atheism, Rizal's burial, and of course, the retraction controversy. For each of these parts, we included figures to show proof for our analysis and tables to make our analysis more organized and easy to understand. The tables under the retraction controversy part shows the events during Rizal's last 24 hours according to different sources. We made this to compare their claims and to look for inconsistencies in order to see whose claims is the most reliable. Next is our exegesis, where we explained and interpreted what our research is trying to convey. For our world before the text, we explained our own thoughts and ideas about Dr. Rizal's retraction. We also included here its significance divided into four parts: personal significance, social significance, national significance, and global significance. And lastly is our list of references from our primary sources to our secondary sources.
Adios, bayang sinisinta.
Dr. Rizal was executed by a firing squad on 30th of December 1896. Until today, we Filipinos still look back at his contributions to the Philippines and the impacts he has made to the world.
Dr. Rizal's contributions? Oh, Dr. Rizal is the father of Filipino nationalism. He wasn't called the Philippines' national hero for nothing, right? He introduced the spirit of nationalism to Filipinos through his novels, used his pen as a weapon to bring up the pride and dignity of Filipinos from the Spanish rule's injustice, strengthen the country's revolutionary spirit, and of course, awaken the minds of the Filipino youth to hone their talents, anything else they're good at or they believe they're good at, and use that in serving the country.
Before the execution, a controversy regarding Dr. Rizal's retraction sparked. The retraction became a phenomenon that Dr. Rizal has left unanswered. It was said that Dr. Rizal had written a document which was only released after his death, stating that he is retracting everything he has said or written about the friars as untrue or unjustified. The document's authenticity has been a significant historical controversy until today.
The claims, testimonies, and reports regarding the controversy of the retraction allowed us historians to hypothesize. We're taking many pieces of evidence into consideration and understanding each detail deeply to fully comprehend the chain of events surrounding the issue of the retraction.
Dr. Rizal was a profound and perspective thinker who used reason as a weapon to fight against tyranny in his country. Dr. Rizal's enemies, mainly the friars, are furious with his works that have provided propaganda that resulted in the act of rebellion of the Filipinos.
There is an evident motive for the church to seek retraction from Dr. Rizal, whether real, fake, or forced. The retraction was necessary to cast doubt on anything that Dr. Rizal had ever written, and to render him hypocrite to discredit his works. This is because at the time Dr. Rizal was proving himself to be a threat for the Spanish government, and a revolution was being plotted against them, with Dr. Rizal being the symbol of freedom and independence that powered it.
So there's this book. It's a biography entitled Light in Rizal's Death Cell by Manolo Ovano. This book is written in English and is considered the primary source of Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours on Earth and his execution. Inside the book is a summarization of eyewitnesses' testimonies and newspaper reports relaying the events that transpired around the history of Dr. Rizal's retraction. Besides the reports and testimonies, Light in Rizal's Death Cell has also shown historical evidence of events that unfolded during the life of Dr. Rizal. These events included different relationships that Dr. Rizal himself had molded all throughout his journeys and agendas.
Now, when was this book written?
The book was not instantly written the same day as Dr. Rizal's execution, because the execution was in 1896 and Light in Rizal's Death Cell was published years after on the 1st of December in 1985.
Is the book really an accurate source, or rather a primary source, for the last 24 hours of Dr. Jose Rizal?
Well, a biography written with only one source can be biased. But in Vana's work, though, he presented all perspectives from many sources. And what's good about this work is how Vanu remained authentic in writing the text. He was consistent with the exact manner in which the testimonies were disclosed. It's now up to the readers to question the truthfulness, accuracy, uniformity, and consistency of the accounts to determine the source's reliability. This manner of writing now creates a book that is unbiased, making it the most reliable primary source for the events that transpired around the retraction.
Besides the light in Rizal's death cell, there were also other primary sources that we used to support our team's analysis regarding the retraction. First is Rene Escalante's Did Jose Rizal Die Catholic? Revisiting Rizal's last 24 hours using spy reports. Dr. Jose Rizal and Ferdinand Blumentritt, the Rizal-Blumentritt correspondence, and Dr. Jose Rizal letters between Rizal's and the reformists. Our team's analysis was done by deconstructing sources and understanding its context, purpose, and what led to that moment. We considered multiple relevant and reliable perspectives on the same event by filtering out any discrepancies to any detail that are mentioned in both primary and secondary sources. Through this method, we were able to emphasize with Dr. Rizal and the people associated with the retraction, appreciate the chronology of events, acquire multiple perspectives of the accounts, filter inaccuracies and myths from reality, and create a big picture of the events surrounding the retraction.
In November 1896, Dr. Rizal was arrested. The Spanish authorities found that Dr. Rizal rebelled against the government using the evidences presented in his writings. As the military court declared Dr. Rizal guilty of rebellion, conspiracies, and sedition, he was sentenced to death in 1896.
According to the most accepted accounts from various testimonies and reports, on December 29 at 6 a.m., Captain Rafael Dominguez read the death sentence to Dr. Rizal, and on the following day, the execution was planned. Things happened very quickly. At 7 to 8 a.m., Dr. Rizal was transferred to his death cell, and after that, the visitors came over. Many other things like the friars attempt to make Dr. Rizal retract happen during his last 24 hours.
On December 30, 1896, at 7 to 7:03 a.m., Dr. Rizal was executed.
His last word was, "It is finished," same as Jesus Christ's last words. Dr. Rizal was executed by a firing squad at Bagong Bayan, which is now Luneta. As he was shot, he turned halfway around and fell backward, lying on the ground facing the sun.
Dr. Rizal's body was brought to San Juan Dios Hospital on the same day of his execution. His remains were buried in Paco Cemetery in an unmarked grave, which Narcia marked with his initials. His grave was later exhumed on August 17, 1898, and the remains were brought to Dr. Rizal's family house in Binondo until it was transferred to his final resting place in Luneta.
On December 13, 1912, a solemn ceremony was held to finally bury his remains in the base of the monument dedicated in the memory of Dr. Rizal. After his death, the Katipunan became more aggressive in fighting the Spaniards. The Katipunan divided its supporters between Emilio Aguinaldo and Bonifacio. And in 1897, delegates voted Aguinaldo as president of the Katipunan, and Bonifacio was demoted to the post director of the Interior. Bonifacio then withdrew his support and formed his own government. This caused a fight between Aguinaldo and Bonifacio's group. On May 10, 1897, Aguinaldo ordered the arrest of Bonifacio. In the same year, Aguinaldo extracted some demands from the Spaniards, and on June 12, 1898, he declared the Philippine independence.
The Philippine society has changed since 1521 during the Spanish colonization, sparked by the events of 1887 through 1896. Dr. Rizal's novels that exposed the state of the Philippine society at the time that were so revealing that through his non-physical weapon of choice, he defied the abusive political forces that lorded over them. He provoked the minds of the Filipinos to resist oppression and in turn became a symbol of national resilience and independence. With all of these, Dr. Rizal's writings sparked a revolution. In today's time, these are the words that were always used by the people, usually foreigners, to describe Filipinos. But have you ever wondered how the Filipinos were like during Rizal's time under the Spanish rule? Filipinos struggled under the oppressive rule of the church during the Spanish Inquisition from 1521, when religion was used to hold supreme power over the citizens of the Philippines. The heavy integration of Catholicism into their culture proved to be a weakness when the church manipulated it to their advantage, to abuse and to oppress Filipinos which they regarded inferior. Decades of unjust treatment from the friars made the natives powerless in their own country.
The Pitan and Fort Santiago are two historical locations significant in the context of Rizal's retraction. It was in the Pitan where Rizal was exiled in 1892. He even described his time there as feeling like it was the end of the world. Rizal established clinics, schools, and water systems for the towns. Next is in Fort Santiago where many political prisoners were housed since its construction in 1593. And Rizal was included here before his execution in 1896.
The 1800s was the climax of Spanish colonization in the Philippines. After 3 centuries of oppression, the citizens finally felt empowered to fight for their rights through Dr. Rizal's first novel, Noli Me Tangere, and its sequel, El Filibusterismo.
When these novels reached the hearts of the Filipinos starting in 1888, it quickly sparked a chain of events, leading to the Philippine Revolution that was against the Spanish colonizers. This time is defined by the Filipinos' determination to fight against their, or should I say, our oppressors towards independence.
After all the discussions, the question still stands. Did Dr. Rizal really retract or not?
Adios, bayang sinisinta.
Calling the case of the people of the Catholic Church versus Dr. Rizal. Are both sides ready?
Ready for the Catholic Church, Your Honor.
Ready for the defense, Your Honor?
Present your case, Mr. Prosecutor.
At the conclusion of the case, we would like you to ask to find that the defendant has indeed retracted. The defendant, Dr. Rizal, has retracted all of his statements against the Catholic Church, including the ones from his novels Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. This can be testified by the existence of a handwritten and signed retraction document which was publicly released in 1955. It read, "I declare myself a Catholic and in this religion in which I was born and educated and which I wish to live and die. I retract with all my heart whether in my words, writings, and publications and conduct has been contrary to my character as a son of the Catholic Church. I believe and confess whatever she teaches and I submit to whatever she demands. I abominate the Masonry as the enemy which is part of the Church and as a society prohibited by the Church. The diocesan prelate may, as a superior ecclesiastical authority, make public this spontaneous manifestation of mine in order to repair the scandal which my acts have caused, and so that God and people may pardon me." According to Father Vincent Balaguer, Dr. Rizal had written and signed this retraction in his death cell in Fort Santiago on December 29, 1896, the night before the execution. The magazine La Juventud, based in Barcelona, Spain, had published a report from Father Balaguer himself, saying that Rizal had surrendered his reasons for retraction during the religious debate on December 29 from 10 a.m. to noon to 3 p.m. to dusk. Father Balaguer did not name his reasons, but various secondary sources, including biographers Letana, Craig, Palma, Carino, Hernandez, Zaid, Guerrero, Coates, Fernandez, and Abeto, believe in Father Balaguer's account. They also mention 4 points to his retraction. According to them, Dr. Rizal has retracted for the 4 following reasons. To first, save his family and town from further persecution. Second is to give Josephine Bracken a legal status as a wife. Third is to secure reforms in the Spanish government. And lastly is to help the Church cut away from the disease which harmed her.
The defendant, Dr. Rizal, is falsely accused of deception, hypocrisy, and dishonor after an alleged retraction surfaced on December 30, 1896, right after his execution and later. At the conclusion of the case, we will ask for a verdict of not guilty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about the framing of a dead man who, in his lifetime, sparked an uprising against the Spanish government which lorded over his country, the island of the Philippines. The alleged retraction aims to corrupt the hero's reputation and symbolism of independence by manipulating the truth of its intentions as an attempt to intercept the developing revolution led by Emilio Aguinaldo in 1896. The prosecutor has enumerated 4 possible reasons for Dr. Rizal's retraction. However, I would like to prove each point otherwise. Firstly, the prosecutor stated that Dr. Rizal retracted to save his family and town from further persecution. However, this is a mere speculation with no account to base it. Therefore, I wish for the judge to strike that off the record. The second reason enumerated was to give Josephine Bracken a legal status as his wife. Indeed, according to an article in El Imparcial, Dr. Rizal was required to retract before he could be married to Josephine Bracken. However, Dr. Rizal had replied energetically to this, saying, "I want to get married but not canonically because they think I am not a Catholic, since they want me to retract. No, it cannot be. I do not like anything with the priests. They are the ones who are responsible for what is happening to me. Because of their suspiciousness, great importance was given to insignificant events of my life." So with that, I wish to note that this reasoning had already been testified against by Dr. Rizal himself and is therefore not a valid claim supporting his retraction. The third reason given was to secure reforms from the Spanish government. However, I would like to point out that if Dr. Rizal had indeed retracted before his execution with eyewitnesses from representatives of the church, then why did the execution push through? Why was he not pardoned if the church, therefore the Spanish government, had insisted upon him before to retract so that he would not be persecuted? In addition to that, this is also a mere speculation. Dr. Rizal never mentioned, nor did anyone hint while he was still alive, that he would retract if he ever saw hope that the government would reform by itself. The fourth and final reason given was, as the prosecutor stated it, and I quote, "to help the church cut away from the disease which harmed her." I believe that this meant that Dr. Rizal wrote the retraction in hopes that the Catholic Church would separate from the government. Am I correct? Because of the ultimate control of land by the friars and domination by the government? I see the point. But again, this was not at all hinted by Dr. Rizal nor any of his close relations. These are, again, mere speculations with no basis, Your Honor. On the other hand, Dr. Rizal had numerous reasons not to retract. First, he knew that he would still be executed even if he wrote a retraction. Second, he was very firm on his beliefs. Third, he was fixated on the thought of dying for the love of his country. And fourth, as I have explained, he did not see the need to retract in order to marry Josephine Bracken. Thank you.
First, Dr. Rizal did not know for sure that he would still be executed even if he wrote the retractions. Efforts to make him retract started as soon as he was deported in Dapitan in 1892. Rizal's first biographer, Vida E. Piscos, had written that from the middle of 1892 till the middle of 1896, Father Pastels Obach and Francisco Sanchez did everything humanly possible to convert Rizal. And Rizal, from day-to-day discussion with them and writing a speech, maintained his contention. It is true that Dr. Rizal refused to repeatedly retract. It is not true that he knew that he would still be executed despite having written a retraction. On December 29, 1896, numerous Jesuits entered his death cell to convince him for the last time to retract. According to Sir Santiago Mentrix of Gerard D. Madrid, at 6 to 7 a.m. on December 29, Captain Dominguez read the death sentence of Dr. Rizal. Afterwards, all the other Jesuits who came in started to persuade him to retract for all the following reasons that I have stated beforehand, some even telling him that he would be pardoned by the church if he had only written the retraction. Later on that day before midnight, according to Father Balaguer, Dr. Rizal had retracted. Therefore, he had written the retraction before midnight, that he thought he would have died even if he did. Only it was unfortunate that the retraction was not found right before the execution. I admit that Dr. Rizal was very firm of his beliefs. Granted that Rizal had written 2 novels against the Spanish rulers, not just one. However, it could be argued that upon a person's death day, his values would change. We can say, perhaps, that when he was alive, Dr. Rizal wanted to serve his people, but on his death day, his focus was to die on his terms. Like any other person, Dr. Rizal was only a human. He had personal needs and wants in his heart. He had spiritual needs, most of all. He wanted to die a Catholic, just as he was born. The four reasons for Dr. Rizal's retraction, as I stated beforehand, were generally accepted ones. However, here is what we in the Catholic Church side, as enumerated by Father Canava, believe to be the true inspiration in Dr. Rizal's conversion. Number one is the first is by the power of prayer. Second is devotion by the Blessed Virgin Mary, and lastly is a sincere piety in deep religion embedded in early solid Catholic education and in the school. We in the Catholic Church believe that Dr. Rizal has offended his religion way too much in his lifetime. He knew that this was not how he was raised. He knew also that the Lord was angry on him. Therefore, his last attempt at salvation, he retracted to become accepted into heaven once he died, which he knew was inevitable. Now that there is evidence that supports the authenticity of the retraction, which are Father Balaguer's accounts and the timing of Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours on Earth. According to Father Balaguer, on December 29 of 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Father Balaguer and Father Clara arrived in Dr. Rizal's prison cell, where they have started to discuss some articles of Catholic faith to Dr. Rizal. Here, Father Balaguer and Dr. Rizal held a religious debate which ended Dr. Rizal asking for the formula of a retraction. They left shortly after that. Then at 3 p.m. later that day, at 10 p.m., they brought two retraction templates from Father Pai, which Dr. Rizal signed a handwritten document before midnight. Now that there's evidence that supports the authenticity of the retraction, which are Father Balaguer's account and the timing of Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours on Earth, according to Father Balaguer, on December 29 from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Father Balaguer and Villa Clara arrived in Dr. Rizal's prison cell, where they started to discuss some articles of Catholic faith with Dr. Rizal. Here, Father Balaguer and Dr. Rizal held a religious debate which ended in Dr. Rizal asking for a formula of a retraction. They left shortly after that. Then at 3 p.m. later that day, at 10 p.m., they brought two retraction templates from Father Pai. Dr. Rizal later signed a handwritten document before midnight, and Father Balaguer hands it over to Father Pai, who submits it to Archbishop Bernardo Rosaleda on 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. the next day, which is execution day. Dr. Rizal performed various acts of piety. He heard Mass, took communication, heard other Mass, almost on his knees, spent the remaining time reading the Kempis, and knelt for a long time before the altar. Then at 6 p.m., just another hour before the execution, Father Balaguer solemnized the wedding of Dr. Rizal and Josephine, since Dr. Rizal has already written the retraction. Lastly, Father Balaguer stated that Dr. Rizal has prayed the rosary, wore the blue scapular, and repeated the prayers that were suggested by the priest and kissed the crucifix as he was walking towards his execution at 7 a.m. on December 3. This proves his conversion to Catholicism after writing the retraction. Of all that has been narrated, I am positive by personal knowledge. I personally intervened and witnessed it myself, and I subscribe and confirm it with an oath. Least perhaps someone may think that I could not remember it with so many details after 20 years. I testify that on the very day of Rizal's death, I wrote a very detailed account of everything. The original of this account I have preserved it from it I have taken all the data of all the present narration. So, if that does not convince you of Father Balaguer's credibility, thereby Dr. Rizal's retraction, then I do not know what will.
Let me save time by saying this straightforward. Father Balaguer is not a reliable source. Firstly, there were numerous inconsistencies in his reports and timeline, which can be proven by credible sources such as Senor Matei of Heraldo de Madrid, Senor Manuel Alhama of El Imparcial, Captain Rafael Dominguez, Father Luis Viza, and Father Antonio Rosel. These people were confirmed with eyewitnesses and testimonies that support their presence during Dr. Rizal's last 24 hours. Together, their reports create a timeline contrasting with Father Balaguer's. As stated by the prosecutor, on December 29 from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Father Balaguer and Father Villaclara arrived in Dr. Rizal's prison cell, where a religious debate transpired which ended in Dr. Rizal asking for the formula of a retraction. However, according to the credible sources I have mentioned, it was Father Faura who was with Father Villaclara at the time, not Father Balaguer. Father Faura's presence was testified by Father Rosell. Father Balaguer had no witnesses. At this time, a heated discussion on religion occurred between Father Faura and Dr. Rizal. The prosecutor mentioned that Father Balaguer and Father Villaclara returned with 2 retraction templates and then Dr. Rizal signed it before midnight. However, this is believed to be the time when he wrote his Mi Ultimo Adios after asking the guards for a pen and paper, and then hid it inside an alcohol burner. He also wrote his last letter to Brother Pasiano at this time. So if Father Balaguer had been here at this time, revising a retraction which we don't know for sure exists, then how could it explain Mi Ultimo Adios, a document which we know for sure exists and was recorded to be written at this time? Moreover, from 3 to 6 a.m. the next day, his execution day, Father Balaguer reported that Dr. Rizal used all of that time performing various acts of piety. How then would it explain the existence of Dr. Rizal's dedication to Josephine Bracken in the book Imitation of Christ by Kempis, when it was said by credible sources that he had written it during this time? To add to that, it was also reported by these credible sources that Dr. Rizal wrote a letter to his parents, read the Bible, and then meditated at this time. No mention of Father Balaguer, a mass, nor any acts of piety. Lastly, according to Father Balaguer, at 6 a.m. the next day, Father Balaguer solemnized the wedding of Dr. Rizal and Josephine Bracken. However, Josephine Bracken herself had testified that she was prohibited by the Spanish officers from seeing Dr. Rizal on the day of his execution. They also did not wed canonically given the absence of a marriage certificate. It was only his dedication in the book that served as proof of their marriage. Also, Dr. Rizal was not one to perform the acts of piety that Father Balaguer mentioned. From what we know of Dr. Rizal, would we actually believe that he had prayed the rosary, wore the blue scapular, repeated the prayer suggested by the priest, and kissed the crucifix as he walked toward his execution? This inconsistency between Father Balaguer's reports versus all other credible sources proves his unreliability. If we trust the reports of all other credible sources, we can conclude that Dr. Rizal did not have the time to write a retraction, nor any draft of it, amid entertaining all of his guests and sorting out his life before his death.
Father Balaguer's account was used by numerous biographers of Dr. Rizal who deemed his account worthy. As I have mentioned before, these include Letana, Craig, Palma, Quirino, Hernandez, Zaid, Guerrero, Coates, Fernandez, and Apeto. His testimonies were also backed up by Father Pio Para. We must note, Your Honor, that there are gaps in the accounts of these credible sources where Father Balaguer could have entered without eyewitness, such as when he had slept and when he was given time to attend to his own personal needs. Well, that is all for me, Your Honor.
Regardless of the gaps in the accounts of these credible sources, Your Honor, Father Balaguer's account still does not reflect Dr. Rizal's character, especially his Catholicism. Rizal experts are not convinced that Father Balaguer's version of Dr. Rizal is consistent with how they know him. Dr. Rizal acknowledged the beauty of Catholicism as he described it in his letters to former Jesuit teacher Father Pablo Pasteles. He described it as the same Christianity poetized and beautified, and as an institution more perfect than the other. Dr. Rizal had described his concept of God to Father Pasteles based on 3 notions according to the biography by Palma in 1949. The first is that God is infinite, wise, and powerful, to whom he attributed all the beautiful and good qualities that his mind could ever conceive. The second is that Dr. Rizal's God was not like the God of the Catholics, but far above such things. And the last is that the best way to connect with God was to have a personal relationship with Him by extending Himself to nature. These are because Dr. Rizal was no longer practicing traditional Catholicism on his death day, nor during his exile in Dapitan. Instead, he was pursuing a cultural version of it. And part of this cultural Catholicism religion was in its methodology of embracing reason. He believed that the Catholic Church has a place in human history, but could not agree that it was capable of error. For him, it was a rather more perfect institution because of its proper organization within the Church. However, just like any other religion, he admitted that it has its flaws and obscurity. And so what he believed in was that tradition was not sacred but more of an ancient literacy legacy. Therefore, Dr. Rizal could not have done all of those acts of piety which Father Balaguer enumerated. They're simply too off character, extremely unbelievable. Now, another unbelievable thing is the retraction itself. If Dr. Rizal had indeed retracted, then he should have died a Catholic after being pardoned by the Church. However, this was not the case. Dr. Rizal did not die a Catholic, for he was not buried in consecrated grounds. Diario de Manila reported that Dr. Rizal's corpse was taken and brought to the cemetery. In 1898, La Independencia published the discovery that Paco Cemetery, where Dr. Rizal was buried, was a general cemetery and not a Catholic cemetery. In addition to that, Paco Cemetery's Book of Burials in 1897 had listed Dr. Rizal's name under buried in unconsecrated grounds. This meant that Dr. Rizal was not given a Catholic burial. Another fact about the Book of Burials is that it was reported to have had a lot of erasures. According to Cavana, this was to conceal or correct any of the following phrases or their equivalents. The first one is, without Church's blessings. The second is, receive Christian burial. And the third one is, by government order. So we can see just how complex this controversy gets, even up to his burial. With many inconsistent documents from the day of his execution, it is unclear which ones are credible. However, one thing is certain. If a retraction did exist before Dr. Rizal's death, then his body should have been buried in a Catholic cemetery. But he did not. Dr. Rizal still died as a non-Catholic under the Church's terms. So, Dr. Rizal did not retract.
Actually, it is still possible for Rizal to have written a retraction but not die a Catholic. The original document, which was signed by Rizal, was lost and only found on May 18, 1935 in the Artesian archives by the archivist Manuel Garcia Cia. However, only the publishers of La Voz Española have seen it. In the history of the retraction, this was third of 4 documents ever discovered, and this was also the real one. Now, I say the real one because there had been many copies of the original. As Father Balaguer admitted in a letter in Father Pio Pai in 1910, when he had presented the second text of the retraction, he said, "This is an exact copy of a retraction signed by Rizal. The handwriting of this copy I do not know, nor do I remember who it is. I even suspect that it might even be Rizal himself. I am sending it to you so that you may verify whether it might be Rizal himself." The 4 texts of the retraction ever discovered are the following. The first was published by La Voz Española in Diario de Manila on December 30, 1896. The second appeared in Barcelona, Spain on February 14, 1897 in magazine La Juventud from Father Balaguer himself. The third is the original, as I have explained, and the fourth appeared in El Imperial on the day after Rizal's execution, which was a short formula of the retraction. Now, despite this complexity in issue, it could be taken from this account that there could be no copies if there was no original. However, if you are still not convinced by the retraction's authenticity, here is my last point to support the retraction's authenticity. A handwriting analysis was already made, and it showed that the original document was indeed Dr. Rizal's handwriting.
On the note of the 4 texts, there is no saying which one is the true original. For example, instead of the words mi cualidad in the original and newspaper texts, the Jesuits' copies have mi calidad. Also, the Jesuits' copies of the Retraction omit the word Católica after the first Iglesia, which are found in the original and the newspaper texts. Also, the Jesuits' copies of the Retraction omit the word Católica after the first Iglesia, which are found in the original and the newspaper texts. Another example is the Jesuits' copies of the Retraction add before the third Iglesia the word misma, which is not found in the original and the newspaper texts. Another, Father Balaguer's text does not begin the second paragraph until the fifth sentence, while the original and the newspaper copies start the second paragraph immediately with the second sentence. Plus, the text of the original Retraction have only 4 commas, while Father Balaguer's copy has 11. And lastly, Father Balaguer's copy did not have the names of the witnesses. Now, if that is the result of the handwriting analysis, then so be it. Dr. Rizal had perhaps written drafts of the Retraction, perhaps by force from the Jesuits and priests who came in to convince him to retract. However, the signature is not legitimate. According to Antonio Abad, Roman Roque, the same person who forged Urbano Lacuna, which was used to capture Emilio Aguinaldo, also forged Dr. Rizal's signature on the Retraction. Additionally, he said that Roque made about 5 copies of the Retraction letter based on a draft prepared by the friars. He even thought of keeping one for himself, as Abad reported, but his copy was taken from him when he was searched upon departure. I would also like to investigate the validity of the Retraction, because even if it is authentic, even if Dr. Rizal had written it, there are obvious signs that he disagreed with its statements and implications. For instance, according to Father Pai, Dr. Rizal rejected the long formula so that Father Balaguer had to dictate from the short formula, but he insisted on adding the phrases "in which I was born and educated" and "Masonry" as the enemy that is of the Church. Dr. Rizal regarded the first one unnecessary and the second as downright contrary to his spirit. Therefore, even if Dr. Rizal had written a Retraction, it still does not reflect his true character.
Your Honor, I would like to point out that the defense's point on Antonio Abad has no proof aside from the report which no one else could easily testify. As for the revisions, I believe that having insisted on a changes with the formula only further proves his will to retract. He merely asked for permission if he could, given that the formula was not in his own words. Therefore, he made changes to make his retraction his. If anything, the revisions only show his willingness to retract in his own terms. So to conclude, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would like to ask you to find Dr. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Riolonta guilty of writing a retraction.
Dr. Rizal's Retraction is one of the most compelling issues in Philippine history. Truly, the existence of a retraction did not squander on the Filipino youth's patriotic spirit. In fact, it prompted it. The arguments against his heroism call for us to look back at the previous injustices and oppression experienced by the country and reflect on them with the current state. Through this controversy, Dr. Rizal was able to pass on his patriarchy to the nation. With or without a retraction, Dr. Rizal sparked the fire which lit a patriotic fervor inside his countrymen that led them to persevere for their independence and civil rights. Regardless of the principles he held at the time of his death, he still served as a hero for the country. Therefore, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I shall ask that you find Dr. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Riolonda not guilty of writing a retraction.
Members of the jury, you have heard all the testimonies concerning their case. It is now up to you to decide on the verdict of this very controversial topic. Did Dr. Rizal, our national hero and symbol of the Philippine independence, retract his belief and notions about the Spanish rule and Catholicism on his very last day? I see that there's no verdict can be made on this day. Therefore, this case shall remain open. The court is adjourned.